Jon Bon Jovi has always been a man who speaks straight from the heart. And when news broke that legendary Philadelphia DJ Pierre Robert had passed away at the age of 70, the rock icon's words carried the kind of emotion that only comes from genuine friendship. On October 29, 2025, Beasley Media Group confirmed that Robert, a beloved voice of WMMR 93.3 FM, had died peacefully in his sleep. The news spread quickly across the music world, and tributes poured in from fans, colleagues, and artists. But none captured his essence quite like Jon Bon Jovi's. In a heartfelt Instagram post, Jon wrote, "Today we lost a great friend, someone who truly loved music. All types of music, someone who loved musicians, not just famous ones or chart toppers. He admired local artists and tomorrow's rising stars." The post was accompanied by two photos, Jon and Pierre smiling together, their friendship visible in every detail. Jon continued, "This man was as curious as he was clever. He was a real musicologist. He knew your influence and your influences. He was a loyal friend. He didn't care if you were the fad or the fashion of the moment. He just cared, and that mattered." Those who knew Pierre agreed completely. He wasn't just a DJ. He was a storyteller, a teacher, and a friend to anyone who loved music. For more than 4 decades, he was the voice that carried Philadelphia through its days and nights. His signature greeting, "Greeting citizens," was instantly recognizable to generations of listeners who tuned in not only for songs, but for warmth, humor, and connection. Jon's tribute went beyond remembering a radio personality. It reflected on Pierre's humanity, the kindness and compassion that defined him. The DJ, someone who preached the gospel of the song to anyone who would listen, was also very in touch with his humanity, Jon wrote. His voice helped the hungry and the homeless, and he did it because he cared. About you, about me, about making the world a little kinder, wonder-filled place to live. Jon ended with words that felt like a goodbye wrapped in gratitude. "We were all lucky to have him as a guide to his musical galaxy, and I was lucky to have him as a friend. Thank you, Pierre. Godspeed." Pierre Robert's story began long before fame. Born William Pierre Robert in 1955, he grew up with a fascination for sound and a love for connection. When he joined WMMR in 1981, he quickly became one of the station's defining voices. His show wasn't just about playing records, it was about celebrating the emotion behind them. Over the years, he hosted popular segments like Pierre's Vinyl Cut, On This Day, and Noontime Workforce Blocks. Each one was crafted with care, blending storytelling with music history, trivia, and humor. Pierre had a way of making every listener feel like part of the conversation. He didn't talk at his audience. He talked to them. For many Philadelphians, his voice became a daily comfort. Whether stuck in traffic or taking a lunch break, people tuned in not just for music, but for companionship. His impact extended beyond radio. Pierre was deeply involved in charity work, lending his voice and time to causes such as the AIDS Walk, Mana's Pie in the Sky fundraiser, and local shelters for the homeless. He believed radio could do more than entertain. It could heal, unite, and inspire. His kindness was legendary. Colleagues described him as endlessly patient and curious, a man who never stopped asking questions and never stopped caring about people. Jon Bon Jovi and Pierre's friendship stretched back decades. They first met in the 80s when Bon Jovi was just breaking into the national scene, and Pierre, already a respected DJ, championed the band's music on air. The two remained friends over the years, bound by shared values, loyalty, empathy, and a deep respect for the power of music. In a 2011 interview, Pierre even joked that Jon Bon Jovi was the most famous person in my cell phone. That small comment reflected his humility and humor. Even surrounded by rock legends, he never lost his down-to-earth spirit. When Jon described Pierre as the loneliest man in showbiz, it wasn't meant as sadness, but as truth. Radio, like music, can be a solitary calling. Behind the microphone, you talk to thousands, yet sit alone in the studio. But Pierre turned that solitude into connection. His show wasn't just broadcasting, it was communion. He made people feel seen, heard, and valued. That ability, that voice, became part of the city's identity. WMMR's management called him one of radio's most enduring and beloved voices. Caroline Beasley, CEO of Beasley Media Group, said, "Pierre's unwavering love for music and his deep connection with listeners made him one of the most beloved voices in radio. He will be greatly missed." In the days after his passing, the station replayed old segments of his broadcasts, his laughter, his warmth, his signature greetings. For many, hearing that voice again felt like being comforted by an old friend. Pierre's studio was a reflection of his soul, cluttered but full of magic. Records, posters, and memorabilia from decades of music filled every inch. There was no sense of hierarchy in his world. A new local band could get as much airtime as a classic Rolling Stones track if he believed in their sound. He was passionate about giving emerging artists a chance. His philosophy was simple: good music deserves to be heard. That same sincerity shaped his interviews. Musicians loved talking to him because he understood them. He didn't just ask about album sales or tours. He asked about inspiration, doubt, and the moments that made them fall in love with music in the first place. He approached every artist, from Bruce Springsteen to a band no one had heard of yet, with the same curiosity and respect. Pierre's influence stretched far beyond Philadelphia. For rock musicians touring through the city, an interview with him was a rite of passage. For local bands, it was a dream. For fans, it was a reminder that radio could still feel human in an increasingly digital world. Jon Bon Jovi's tribute struck a deeper chord because it came from one artist to another, one storyteller recognizing another. "He knew your influence and your influences," Jon said, capturing Pierre's ability to see the layers of an artist's journey. "He didn't care if you were the fad or the fashion of the moment. He just cared." In those words, Jon described the kind of person the industry rarely sees anymore. Pierre didn't chase trends. He chased truth. His love of music was pure, untouched by ego or commercialism. To him, every song had meaning, and every musician had a story worth hearing. Even as he aged, Pierre never lost that spark. His broadcasts remained joyful, his humor sharp, his curiosity endless. He believed that music was a lifelong conversation, and he never stopped listening. Fans often spoke about how his enthusiasm was contagious. When Pierre loved a song, you couldn't help but love it too. When he passed away, Philadelphia felt quieter. Social media flooded with memories, old clips, and quotes. Listeners who had grown up with his voice shared stories about how he'd shaped their taste in music, how his laughter made long commutes bearable, and how his kindness had touched their lives. For Jon Bon Jovi, the loss felt deeply personal. In many ways, Pierre represented everything good about the music world: authenticity, community, and soul. "The station was lucky to have him on the air," Jon wrote. "We were all lucky to have him as a guide to his musical galaxy, and I was lucky to have him as a friend." That final line, "I was lucky to have him as a friend," felt like the closing lyric to a lifelong song. It was simple, heartfelt, and final. It also captured exactly what Pierre had given to so many people: friendship through the airwaves. Even in death, Pierre's legacy lives on. His archives remain filled with interviews, reflections, and musical moments that continue to inspire. His catchphrase, "Greetings, citizens," will forever echo in Philadelphia's collective memory. His laughter, his wisdom, and his love for the art form he served will never fade. Jon Bon Jovi's tribute reminds us of something essential: that behind every great artist, every band, every song that reaches our hearts, there are people like Pierre Robert making sure those sounds are heard. People who believe that music can change lives. People who give their voice so that others can find theirs. Pierre Robert was one of those people. He was more than a DJ. He was a friend to thousands, a mentor to artists, and a symbol of what passion and kindness can achieve. And as Jon Bon Jovi so beautifully said, he just cared. And that mattered. In those few words lies the truth of Pierre's entire life. He cared about music, about people, and about making the world a little brighter with every song he played. And for that, the world will always remember him.